Welcome to Living Aligned. I'm your scoliosis coach, Dr. Andromeda Stevens. Today, we're going to be talking about the role of postural awareness in your life and what that means. So what we're talking about is basically how you exist all day long. If you have scoliosis and you have been working on that with a professional, maybe you're doing Schroth physical therapy, maybe you're working with a physical therapist, maybe you're doing Pilates, maybe you are wearing a brace. What you do all day long really matters. If you're wearing a brace and you're doing exercises, these things are time consuming for you. They take energy, they take money, they take trips to your therapist. But you could be undoing all of those amazing things with just bad habits all day long. We sit all day, we're in the car, we're at our desk, we're at school, we sleep, we walk around, we work out, and those are hours of your life which can greatly impact your scoliosis for the better or for the worse. So understanding your daily habits of better alignment will greatly improve your overall wellness program that you're working so hard on. And for me, personally, made a gigantic impact in my pain. Simple things that I wasn't even thinking about, like how I was sitting, how I was standing, how I was sleeping, how I was walking, how I was picking up things and working out and putting load on my body. So we're going to get into each one of those, so don't worry. And if we have any cool little toy or prop that we're going to be utilizing, you can check out all those links in the show notes. A lot of these little trips, a lot of these tricks and tips are outlined in my Scoliosis Coach handbook. So let's talk about sitting. So we sit all day, right? You're commuting, you're at school, you're at your desk, and perhaps you are leaning all the time and you don't even really realize it. If you have a scoliosis, which way you lean could be making your curve worse. First and foremost, this has to be evaluated by your therapist, right? You have to know what your curve is. You need to have an understanding first. You have to have an x-ray, you have to have an evaluation so you know what we're talking about. None of these protocols that we're going to talk about are globally good for everybody. Your case is unique. So being aware of how you're sitting, I'm crossing my legs right now. Would that be a good idea for my pelvis, for my curve type? Should I be crossing the other way? Should I be sitting straight up? Should I have my leg off the side? Should I cross at the ankles? What happens if I cross my ankles like a cowboy style? All of these things actually really matter for your pelvic alignment. So it's important to get that analyzed and understand it and start implementing it. But again, the biggest one is which way you lean when you're sitting. Are you leaning into your curve? Are you leaning away from your curve? Are you sitting up straight? Are you leaning back over your desk and cracking your back? That's the worst. Stop doing that right now. Let's also talk about standing. Standing is important because if you have a scoliosis, you most likely have a hip misalignment that needs to be readdressed, realigned. Your Schroth therapist will tell you what the best standing position would be for you and what side you should load. What side should you be standing heavy on? What side should you carry your heavy bags on? What if you have a rolling bag? What arm should you be dragging that with? All these things are important. So standing can come into play with a lot of things, including working out. Like what if you're lifting weight and you're standing? That would be a squat or a deadlift or a good morning or a kettlebell swing. So standing is important. Get that figured out with your therapist. Most importantly, stand tall. The more you pull yourself up, whether you're sitting or standing, will realign your spine, pull your muscles and elongate your muscles, stretch your muscles, make space between your discs, and you'll look amazing. So standing definitely has its moments in the scoliosis realm of therapy. Lastly would be sleeping. If you have scoli, you should be either wearing a brace when you're sleeping or doing some sort of pillowing techniques when you're sleeping, and that would also be something that would be specific to your case. Your therapist will provide what kind of bolsters you should use, perhaps under your curve when you're sleeping on your side. Should you sleep on your right side? Should you sleep on your left side? Should you have a pillow between your knees? Are you better off sleeping on your back? Those things all are customized to your curve type. I can tell you that belly sleeping is usually the worst. You can't really do much correcting there. And in fact, you're going to end up in some Spider-Man position with your shoulders misaligned, and you're going to bring a leg up, and that's going to really tweak your pelvis and rotate your spine. So belly sleeping is not advisable for scoli. So try to avoid that if you can. So let's just round this out a little bit. So we talked about standing and sitting and sleeping, but in general, most of us are looking down. We're looking at our cell phones, we're looking at our devices, we're looking at computers, books, whatever it is. This is really impacting our cervical neck curvature in a pretty detrimental way. I'm seeing this on X-ray with children, with adults of all ages. It's a problem. So we need to start addressing how you manage holding your phone looking down. It's actually got a term now. We just call it text neck. Bring your phone up so you're looking at your phone from a more eye level position, whether it's put a pillow on your lap to rest your arms on, hold your phone up in front of you, lie down and recline, look at your phone. Whatever you can do to keep your head from looking down. If you give your children devices or games to keep them busy at the table, and we all know that we do it, we've seen this at restaurants, you will invariably see these children in this complete shell shape, which is just terrible. Those are not natural curves of the spine. So we have to get these devices up, and little tweaks that you can do with your laptop computer, because I look at a laptop all day. When I'm done with clients, I have to do files. If the tilt of the computer is just slightly modified or put on a little device that you can get on Amazon to just sort of tilt your computer, your neck will be much happier for it. So little tweaks that you can do for your workspace, for your daily life to make your neck happier. Don't forget your neck is connected to your upper back, which is usually where people have their first curvature in their back. So the neck matters. So sitting in your car is a big thing. People tend to sit at their desk a certain way, sit in their car a certain way. These are usually the hours we spend the most time at, but don't forget television time. We don't even want to know how many hours we spend in front of that television, but the way you're leaning and the way that you could simply do a propping device in our car, it can be the window, like on that little armrest, and that could be a great thing for your curve to be shifting that way. For me, for my curve, since I have a right upper thoracic curve, which is the most typical curve style in females, is I would hang out on the console in my car. I was leaning on my curve for hours, for months, who knows how long, until I was taught to make that change. So understand your curve, and then understand how to make those simple changes at your desk. If you're a child and you're in school, those desks sometimes have that return, that built-in return that's bolted to the chair. So we have this desk, we have this arm piece on the right, and most curves, like we just said, are to the right. So these children are sort of forced to lean to the right because that's the way the desk was designed. That's a tragedy. They do make a left-handed version of that desk, by the way. So you could get the other version of that desk for your child, or have them move to more of a table with a chair situation, or just turn that desk around and put a stool in front of that desk, anything so that you're not leaning on your curve all day. You need to know what these things are that you're doing, be aware of them, make the changes. So let's talk about some other postural issues that are going on with not just with scoli, with all of us. We all have a spine. We have curves to the spine. The healthy, natural curves to the spine are the low back curves inward, the upper back curves outward, and the neck, again, curves inward. These are the natural curves to the spine. I'm looking at them from the side, by the way. Here is the front. Here's the back. These are the spiny parts that you can feel on your own spine. So we're talking about what it looks like from the side view. This is why a side X-ray is very important when you're diagnosing scoliosis, by the way, and during your management of your scoliosis. These curves truly matter. This didn't used to be sort of factored into the old-fashioned treatment of scoli, but we know better now. So these curvatures have names. This is a lordosis or a lumbar, lordotic part of your low back. This is a kyphotic or the thoracic part of your upper back. And this is your cervical or your neck curve, which is also a lordotic curve. Those are fancy words. We have an inward curve, outward, and inward curves of the spine. These tend to be disrupted with scoli. The most typical scenario is that the upper back will flatten out. Sometimes it can even become a little bit concave. The lumbar spine can become a little flattened out, or it can become convex. These curves can be a little distorted. If you don't have a side x-ray, how would you know that? And then you wouldn't be able to be treating it and being aware of it. We already talked about the neck, right? We talked about text neck, and that means that this neck curve right here is flattened out. That does not look good. When you have flattened out curves, this is basically a pogo stick right now. This doesn't have a good spring to it. This is not a good shock absorber. If we don't have a good shock absorber, the scoliosis can become the shock absorber, and we don't want that. So being aware of these curves of the spine are just as important as the scoliosis curves. Thinking about preserving your low back curve, your outward curve here, and your neck. There are postural ways to do this. How are you sitting? Are you arching over your desk and making this more flat? Are you belly sleeping and making this more flat? Are you slumping in your chair and making this more backward curved in the low back? So how you sit and stand and operate in the world, considering these curves is also very important. Make sure that you work with your therapist on these issues for your posture. So this is the fun part of our show where we talk about a common misconception or a myth with scoliosis. And today, we're going to talk about how people believe scoliosis is only visible from the outside. If I can't see it, then nothing's wrong. Well, not exactly. We talked about before about those rotations that happen in the spine, that we might have a curve that it rotates around and that's measurable with the little scoliometer device that we talked about. Check the show notes for purchase of those little devices. So you can measure a scoliosis from the outside, and you might see a very small rotation. It could be as low as 5 degrees. I shared a story before that we had a young ballerina patient in the clinic, and she had very, very minimal symptoms. We could barely see anything from the outside. It was only like a 5 degrees of rotation, but she actually had a 29-degree curve going on. So sometimes the body can mask the curves very well. I mask mine very well. I have a 20-something curve in my thoracic spine. Nobody can really see it. If I point it out to you, you could see it. If I really exaggerated the way I was sitting, you could see it. So it's not always visible from the outside. Not exactly true. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you for joining us on this episode. The next episode, we're going to be talking about Pilates and Pilates with scoliosis. So join us. We'll see you on the next episode. And thank you for joining us on Living Aligned. I'm Dr. Andromeda Stevens, your scoliosis coach.